The CBS Evening News series Eye on America, Separated and Counting, shows how families continue to be separated at the border. Tonight, Manuel Bojorquez reports on a father who had his 3-year-old son taken from him. 6 months later, CBS News was there for the heartbreaking reunion. Here's a preview.
Giovanni Paz Rosa says he was shot 5 times in Honduras for refusing to join a gang. He feared his son, 3-year-old Michael, was next, so in February, they fled. But at the McAllen Border Patrol Processing Center, officers accused him of not being the father because his last name was not on Michael's birth certificate. They took his 3-year-old son away. We met up with Paz Rosa as he traveled to New York to be reunited with Michael. It is something difficult. I felt like a part of my life was taken away from me when they told me my son was going to be separated from me. I know I'll be so happy to be with him again, he said. But after 178 days apart, this was Michael's reaction.
And Manuel Bojorquez joins me now. Boy, that's a heartbreaking cliffhanger we're left with there, right. Manny. What more can you tell us about what led to the separation of this father from his son?
Well, this was after zero tolerance. So this was not during that part where it was almost an immediate that if you were caught crossing the border with a child, you would be separated. In this case, it was a father who brought his son with a birth certificate, but his last name was not on there. So Border Patrol said, "Sir, your last name's not on this birth certificate. We don't believe you're the father." He tried to explain to them, and according to his attorneys, that there was a technicality back in Honduras that he didn't have that he had an expired ID, and therefore they couldn't put the last name on the birth certificate. He asked for a paternity test. That happened, but after 5 months.
5 months?
So they were separated 6 months while they were trying to figure all that out.
Does it normally take 5 months to get the results of a paternity test?
You know, it's really hard to tell because we're not privy to all the details of all of these cases, but in this case, that's how long it took. And then it came back, and it was, of course, 99.9997. He was the father, but that's after an almost 6-month separation, because then it took that long for the father to be released from detention and for him to reunite with the child up in Cayuga, which is a foster care facility here in New York. I'll tell you this without giving it all away.
I know, I was going to say, I have so many questions and I know you can't answer them all.
It's a very different reaction than we've seen before, and you're probably familiar with some of these stories where you have very emotional reunions where everybody's very happy to be back together. This one played out a little differently, and it brings up the question of the trauma that some of these children have endured, especially when they're that young.
Oh, when children are that young and they're separated from their parents, I'm going to guess, I haven't seen it, but I'm sure he almost didn't recognize his father, because that's usually at that age what can happen. I mean, for a child that's so young, 3 years old, I guess
3 years old.
He was. 6 months is a huge percentage of their life, you know?
It
so
is.
It's a very traumatic and heartbreaking thing to see. I want to ask you what the Inspector General said about the toll these separations are taking on children.
They are aware, especially after the report that was issued earlier this month, that there are issues. They look at the caseload that many of these clinicians and the people that are the social workers in these shelters are dealing with, and have said, yes, in many cases there were too many children per clinician or per psychiatrist, if that's the kind of person they had in those facilities, and also really that they just didn't have enough people, enough training for all of this. And you have to remember that many of these children, or children in general, can't say, I feel depressed. They don't have that vocabulary and that ability to express how they're feeling. They noted in there, many just said, my chest hurts, and that there were really just the government would say, given the influx of people, that they tried their best to accommodate everyone. But I think pediatricians we've spoken with would say that clearly the fact that they were separated to begin with, that was the real damage there.
Right. Of course, now look, you can see the government's argument that they have to prove that this person is the parent of the child. I understand that, but they should then speed up these DNA tests and paternity tests.
That's what many advocates have argued. The government clearly is saying we're trying to process everybody as quickly as we can, and we can't just allow someone to say, I'm their father, right? Because they do believe that some children are trafficked or could be. So they have to, you know, dot their I's and cross their T's. But many advocates, especially in a case like this, are saying just think about the trauma on the child, because it could be long lasting. Many of these families won't have the means to get them help even after they're reunited.
Exactly. Well, Manuel Bojorquez, thank you so much for sharing your excellent reporting with us.
Thank you so much.
And you can watch this story tonight on the CBS Evening News at 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on CBSN.